There are envelopes that change your life. Not because they're marked urgent, not because they're stamped confidential. Quite the opposite. They arrive looking completely ordinary. White paper, black print, a return address you've never noticed before. They blend into every other piece of mail sitting in your mailbox until you open them. Then suddenly, nothing is ordinary anymore. Mine arrived on a quiet Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that felt almost too peaceful. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, fresh coffee filled the house with its familiar warmth. Birds gathered outside the dining room window, fighting over crumbs I'd scattered across the patio before breakfast. Everything felt normal, comfortably normal. I had always loved Wednesdays. Mondays carried pressure. Fridays carried expectations, but Wednesdays simply existed. No rush, no celebrations, just life. I finished watering the flowers lining the front porch before walking toward the mailbox. Mostly advertisements, a grocery flyer, 2 credit card offers, the monthly electric bill, then one unfamiliar envelope, white, plain, professional. The address belonged to a hospital nearly 40 minutes from our neighborhood. I frowned immediately. We didn't use that hospital, never had. Marcus preferred another medical center closer to his office. Our family doctor practiced somewhere else entirely. For a moment, I assumed the envelope had been delivered to the wrong house. I checked the address. My address. Correct. Then I looked at the recipient, Mrs. Angela Carter. Again, correct. Strange. I carried the stack of mail inside, set everything on the kitchen counter, started sorting. Bills on one side, advertisements in another, recycling beside the trash can. The hospital envelope almost landed in the recycling pile. Almost. Something stopped me. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps instinct, or perhaps the quiet voice inside every person that whispers, "Look one more time." I picked it back up. The envelope felt unusually thick, not heavy, just important. I opened it carefully. Several folded pages slipped onto the countertop. The first page immediately caught my attention. Final notice. My stomach tightened. Final notice? For what? I unfolded the paperwork completely. The hospital logo appeared across the top. Below it, outstanding medical balance. I blinked several times. There had to be a mistake. The patient information listed a name I didn't recognize. Danielle Brooks. I read it again. Danielle Brooks. The name meant absolutely nothing to me. No relatives, no neighbors, no co-workers, no friends. No one I'd ever heard Marcus mention. I continued reading. Patient name, Danielle Brooks. Outstanding balance, several $1,000s. Service date, almost 5 years earlier. I frowned. Perhaps someone accidentally inserted another patient's paperwork into my envelope. Hospitals make mistakes. People share similar names. Addresses become mixed up. Everything has an explanation, or so I believed, until I reached the bottom of the second page, a section labeled Emergency Contact Information. My eyes moved slowly across the lines. Emergency Contact, Marcus Carter. I froze. No, that couldn't be right. I looked closer. Relationship? Father of child. The words refused to make sense. Father of child. I actually laughed, a short, confused laugh, because sometimes your mind protects itself by rejecting impossible information. Marcus couldn't be the father of someone else's child. We'd been married for 31 years. Surely this belonged to another Marcus Carter. It wasn't an uncommon name. There had to be thousands of them. I searched the page desperately. Date of birth, phone number, address. Then I found it. Emergency contact phone number. Marcus's cell phone. Our home address. Everything matched. Every single detail. The room suddenly felt unusually quiet. The birds outside continued singing. The coffee maker clicked as it finished brewing. A delivery truck passed slowly down the street. Life continued exactly as before, only mine didn't. I sat down at the kitchen table because my knees suddenly felt unreliable. The paperwork trembled slightly in my hands, not because of the air conditioning, because my hands had begun shaking. I forced myself to breathe slowly, one page at a time. Maybe I misunderstood something. Maybe father of child referred to another patient. Maybe the hospital printed the forms incorrectly. Maybe. Hope is incredibly creative when truth feels unbearable. I carefully examined every page again. The billing statements, insurance adjustments, payment history. Most of it meant very little. Medical terminology, insurance codes, billing numbers. Then I noticed something else. Several handwritten signatures, admission paperwork, consent forms. One signature immediately stood out. Marcus. Not printed, signed. His handwriting, the same signature I'd watched him write on mortgage documents, tax returns, anniversary cards. 31 years teaches you to recognize someone's handwriting instantly. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding, no coincidence. Marcus had signed these documents personally. I stood abruptly, walked toward the living room, then turned around, walked back into the kitchen. I didn't know what to do with my own body. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar. The house, the furniture, even the photographs lining the hallway. Our wedding, family vacations, Christmas mornings. 31 years of memories silently watching me from picture frames. How many of those memories were real? How many existed beside another life I never knew about? No, I whispered aloud. It sounded less convincing the second time. I reached for my phone, stopped, put it down, picked it up again. Calling Marcus immediately felt impossible. If there was an explanation, I needed facts first. Not arguments, not accusations. Facts. The hospital would know. Hospitals keep records. Hospitals correct mistakes. Hospitals could tell me someone mixed up two files. I dialed the number printed across the top of the statement. After several automated prompts, a woman answered. Billing department, how may I help you? My voice barely sounded like mine. I swallowed. I think I received someone else's hospital bill. The representative politely asked for the account number. I read it carefully. She typed quietly, then stopped. The mailing address appears correct. My heartbeat quickened. There must be a mistake. The patient isn't anyone I know. Another pause. I understand. She sounded genuinely kind. But because of privacy regulations, I'm limited in what I can discuss. Of course, privacy laws. I almost apologized. Then I asked one final question. The emergency contact. I hesitated. Was that information entered by the patient? Another pause. No, the representative answered gently. The admission documents were personally signed. Another brief pause. By Mr. Marcus Carter. The room began to spin slightly, not dramatically, just enough to make me grip the edge of the kitchen table. I thanked her, hung up,
looked back at the hospital bill resting quietly in front of me. It no longer looked like paperwork. It looked like a door, one I never intended to open. One that had quietly arrived inside an ordinary envelope, waiting to reveal a life my husband had somehow managed to keep hidden for years.
For nearly an hour, I sat at the kitchen table without moving. The hospital bill remained exactly where I'd placed it. Sunlight slowly shifted across the pages. The clock above the refrigerator continued ticking. Everything around me behaved as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Only I knew otherwise. I picked up the paperwork again. This time I forced myself to read every page. Slowly, carefully. Not searching for confirmation, searching for mistakes, addresses, dates, medical codes, insurance numbers, anything. Something that would prove the entire thing belonged to another family. Instead, every page only became more specific. The emergency contact listed Marcus's cell phone number, not just the number, his work extension from years ago, the extension he had before the company moved offices. Whoever completed these forms knew details that only someone close to Marcus would know. My heart refused to accept what my eyes continued reading. I looked at the service date again. 5 years earlier. My mind immediately traveled backward. 5 years? What had Marcus been doing then? He traveled often during that period. Construction projects, client meetings, weekend conferences. At least that's what I believed. Suddenly, those memories no longer felt reliable. I stood and walked toward the hallway closet. Inside sat several storage boxes filled with old calendars, planners, and family records. I had always been the organized one. Birthdays, doctor appointments, vacations, everything had been written down. If Marcus had been somewhere else that week, I would know. After several minutes of searching, I found my planner from 5 years earlier. The pages had faded slightly. Little handwritten notes filled nearly every square. Grocery lists, dentist appointments, anniversary dinner reservations. Then I reached the week listed on the hospital bill. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Marcus had been away. I stared at my own handwriting. Marcus, Chicago project meeting. 3 words, nothing more. At the time, they meant nothing. Today, they suddenly meant everything. I remembered helping him pack. His navy suitcase, 2 dress shirts, his favorite leather shoes. I even slipped a handwritten note into his suitcase. Good luck. I love you. The memory hit me so unexpectedly that I had to close the planner. For years, I'd remembered that week with quiet affection. Now, I wasn't even certain he'd gone to Chicago. The realization settled heavily inside me. One question quietly became another, then another, then another. How many business trips had actually been business trips? How many late meetings had really been meetings? How many excuses had I accepted simply because I trusted the man giving them? Trust is an extraordinary thing. It doesn't require proof every day. That's what makes it beautiful, and sometimes dangerous. I returned to the kitchen. The hospital paperwork still waited. One section caught my attention for the first time. Insurance information. Several charges had already been paid. Only a remaining balance had triggered the collection notice. Who paid the rest? I couldn't answer that, but another thought arrived almost immediately. If Marcus had signed the admission papers, had he also paid the hospital? Using what account? Our joint checking account? One of his business accounts? A credit card I didn't know existed?
Questions multiplied faster than answers. I walked into my home office, opened the filing cabinet where I kept years of tax returns and financial statements. Marcus always handled the business. I handled the household. That division had worked comfortably for decades. Or so I believed. I pulled out bank statements from 5 years earlier, month after month. Checking account, savings account, credit cards. At first, nothing looked unusual. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, normal life. Then I noticed a series of recurring withdrawals every month, almost the same amount. The payee's name didn't mean anything to me. CMB Financial Services. I frowned. I couldn't remember ever seeing it before. Perhaps it really was business-related. Marcus owned part of a construction company then. Business expenses appeared regularly. Equipment, contractors, professional memberships. I nearly turned the page. Then something stopped me. The amount. It never changed. Exactly the same payment every month. Businesses rarely spend identical amounts month after month. Subscriptions do. Support payments do. Automatic transfers do. But construction expenses? Not usually. I made a note on a yellow legal pad. Research CMB Financial Services. The list had officially begun. One mystery, now two. The phone rang unexpectedly. I nearly jumped. Marcus. His picture appeared on the screen, smiling, standing beside me during our anniversary vacation, a photograph that suddenly felt painfully unfamiliar. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. His cheerful voice filled the room. "Hey, Angie. I'm running a little late. Client meeting took longer than expected. I'll grab dinner on the way home. Love you." The message lasted less than 20 seconds, yet every word felt different now. Not because I knew he was lying, because for the first time, I no longer knew when he was telling the truth. That uncertainty hurt more than anger. Anyone can survive difficult truth. Living inside uncertainty is far more exhausting. I deleted nothing, saved everything, including the voicemail. Then I returned to the hospital bill. Another detail suddenly caught my attention: the baby's birth date. I calculated quickly. The little boy would now be almost 5 years old. 5. Old enough to start kindergarten. Old enough to ride a bicycle. Old enough to ask his father bedtime questions. Old enough to believe Marcus belonged completely to him. The thought caught me completely off guard. Until that moment, the child had been little more than words printed on paper. Now he became real. A little boy, completely innocent. Whatever truth waited ahead, he hadn't created it. He'd simply been born into it. I quietly whispered to myself, "This isn't his fault." The sentence mattered, because I already knew something. If this story was true, there were going to be more victims than I first imagined. That evening, before Marcus came home, I carefully placed the hospital bill back inside its envelope, then locked it inside my desk drawer. Not because I wanted to hide it forever, because I needed time. Time to gather facts. Time to understand. Time before one ordinary envelope turned into a conversation that would change both our lives forever. And deep inside, I had the uncomfortable feeling that the hospital bill wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first document that had accidentally escaped years of carefully protected secrets.
That evening, Marcus came home smiling. He carried takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant, the same place we'd ordered from for years whenever neither of us felt like cooking. Normally, the smell of fresh garlic bread filled me with comfort. That night, it made my stomach turn. "Long day?" he asked as he placed the bags on the kitchen counter. I looked at him carefully, really looked at him. 31 years together teaches you someone's face better than your own. The small wrinkle beside his left eye when he smiled, the way he loosened his tie before taking off his jacket, the habit of placing his keys in exactly the same ceramic bowl beside the front door. Everything looked familiar, everything except me. I was seeing him through completely different eyes. He noticed my silence. "You okay?" His voice carried genuine concern, or at least it sounded genuine. That uncertainty hurt. I forced a small smile. "Just tired." He nodded. "I know the feeling." Then he walked upstairs to change clothes. I remained standing in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps, the opening and closing of dresser drawers, the shower turning on. Ordinary sounds, the soundtrack of a marriage. Only now every ordinary sound seemed to hide extraordinary questions. At dinner, we spoke about ordinary things: the weather, our son's upcoming business trip, a neighbor planting new flowers. Marcus laughed at something on television. I even laughed once, out of habit, not because I found anything amusing. The hospital bill remained locked inside my desk drawer, only 20 feet away, yet it felt as though it sat between us at the dinner table, invisible, heavy, impossible to ignore. Several times I almost asked him directly, "Who is Danielle Brooks? Why did you sign hospital papers? Who is the little boy?" The questions pressed against my lips. I never asked them. Not that night, because instinct told me something important. Once those questions left my mouth, nothing would ever return to normal, and I still wasn't ready for that. After dinner, Marcus settled into his favorite chair with the evening news. I quietly walked into my home office, locked the door, removed the envelope from the drawer, then opened my laptop. The yellow legal pad remained beside me. One question sat at the top of the page. What is CMB Financial Services? I typed the name into a search engine. Several unrelated businesses appeared: mortgage companies, consulting firms, insurance agencies. None seemed connected. Then one listing caught my attention: Child Support Payment Processing Services. I stared at the screen. No, there had to be another explanation. The initials matched, nothing more. I clicked anyway. The website explained how family courts in several states used third-party processors to collect and distribute monthly child support payments. My heart began beating faster. Perhaps this wasn't the same company. Businesses often share similar names. I searched the mailing address listed on one of our old bank statements. The address matched exactly. I leaned back slowly, trying to process what I had just discovered. Every month, the exact same amount. 5 years. The math became impossible to ignore. I quickly multiplied the monthly payment by 12, then by 5 years. The total made my breath catch. Tens of thousands of dollars. Money I believed supported Marcus's business. Money I believed protected our retirement. Money I believed belonged to our shared future. Instead, it appeared to have been supporting someone else's life. I closed the laptop immediately, not because I doubted the information, because my hands had started shaking again. This couldn't continue through internet searches. I needed facts, verified facts. The next morning, I called my friend Laura Bennett. Laura wasn't just a friend, she was one of the most respected forensic accountants in our city. She'd helped families untangle financial fraud for more than 20 years. We'd met through a neighborhood charity fundraiser. Over time, our friendship had grown naturally. She answered on the second ring. "Angela, it's good to hear from you." Her cheerful voice almost made me cry. "I need your help." The change in my tone immediately caught her attention. "What's happened?" I'd rather explain in person. There was only a brief pause. "My office, 1 o'clock. Bring whatever you have." She asked no unnecessary questions. That was one of the things I admired most about Laura. She never assumed. She investigated. 24 hours after opening the hospital envelope, I sat inside Laura's office. The envelope rested between us, so did several years of bank statements. Laura listened without interrupting. I explained the hospital bill, the emergency contact form, Marcus's signature, the mysterious monthly payments. When I finally finished speaking, the room became completely silent. Laura didn't rush toward conclusions. She simply opened the envelope, read every page, then quietly examined the bank statements. Several minutes passed before she looked up. "What do you think?" she asked gently. I laughed sadly. "I don't know what to think anymore." She nodded. "That's actually a good place to begin." I frowned. "Why?" "Because certainty without evidence is dangerous." She rested her hand on the hospital paperwork. "But uncertainty doesn't have to last forever." She reached for a highlighter, then circled several account numbers, several billing dates, several payment references. "I think we can answer many of your questions." Hope flickered inside me for the first time since Wednesday morning. "Really?" Laura smiled softly. "Financial records tell stories." She paused. "The question is whether we're reading the entire story yet." She opened another folder, removed a legal pad, and wrote 3 words across the top. "Follow the money." Those 3 words would soon uncover far more than either of us imagined, because the hospital bill wasn't simply connected to one hidden child. It was connected to an entirely separate life Marcus had somehow managed to build without me ever knowing it existed.
Laura didn't begin with the hospital bill. She began with the bank statements. That surprised me. I assumed the admission papers held the biggest answers. She gently shook her head. "Paperwork tells us what happened." She tapped the stack of financial records. "Money tells us how often it happened." There was a difference, a very important difference. She spread nearly 5 years of statements across her conference table, one after another. Checking accounts, savings accounts, credit card payments, business reimbursements, everything arranged by date. Looking at so many years of our financial life laid out together felt strangely intimate, almost invasive. These weren't just numbers. They represented vacations we'd taken, groceries we'd bought, birthdays we'd celebrated, the ordinary rhythm of a marriage, or so I had believed. Laura highlighted the recurring payments to CMB Financial Services. Same day, every month. She circled another section, never late, then another, never missed. She looked up. "This isn't accidental." I stared at the page. "I know." She continued studying the records. "Notice something else." I leaned forward. The payments always appeared 2 or 3 days after Marcus deposited his business distributions, never before, always after, almost as though he waited for fresh income. So he planned it. The words escaped before I realized I'd spoken. Laura answered carefully. "The payment pattern appears intentional." She never exaggerated, never rushed toward conclusions. Everything she said remained tied to evidence. That calm professionalism became an anchor for me, because emotionally I was drifting. She opened another folder. "This interests me." I looked down. Credit card statements. Thousands of transactions. Restaurants, hotels, airfare, office supplies. At first, everything looked ordinary. Then Laura pointed to several hotel charges. They're always during business trips. I frowned. So? She slid my old planner beside the statement. According to your calendar, she pointed toward one date, Marcus was attending a construction conference in Chicago. Then she turned the credit card statement toward me. The hotel wasn't in Chicago. It was only 20 minutes from the hospital that issued Danielle's bill. I felt the air leave my lungs. No. Laura quietly nodded. The dates match. I searched desperately for another explanation. Maybe the conference changed locations. Maybe. The familiar word returned again. Maybe. Hope had become very creative. Laura didn't interrupt my thoughts. She simply continued reviewing documents. Eventually, she stopped. There are additional restaurant charges. She pointed again. Children's clothing stores, toy stores, family entertainment centers. My heart sank. None of those purchases had ever come home. No toys, no birthday gifts, no children's clothing, nothing, which meant they had gone somewhere else, to someone else. Laura quietly wrote another note. Potential secondary household expenses. I looked away. The phrase somehow hurt more than the numbers. Secondary household. Such clinical language. Yet behind those words lived birthdays, school lunches, bedtime stories, a little boy growing up, while I remained completely unaware. Laura finally closed the binder. I think it's time to expand the investigation. I looked back at her. What does that mean? It means we stop guessing and start verifying. She smiled gently. And start verifying. That afternoon, she contacted Michael Harris, the same attorney who had helped me through previous financial matters. Michael arrived carrying only a notebook. No assumptions, no opinions, only questions. I appreciated that immediately. Laura summarized everything. The hospital bill, the emergency contact, the recurring payments, the travel records. Michael listened carefully, occasionally making notes. When Laura finished, he remained silent for several moments. Finally, he spoke. If this pattern continues, he paused thoughtfully, it suggests long-term financial concealment. Long-term, not one mistake, not one bad decision. Years. The word echoed painfully inside my mind. Michael continued. Before confronting Marcus, I recommend understanding exactly what we're dealing with. Laura agreed immediately. Facts first. I remembered those words. Facts first, emotion later. The meeting ended with a simple plan. Laura would continue tracing the financial records. Michael would review any legal implications. I would gather every household statement I could find. No confrontation. Not yet. As I prepared to leave, Laura stopped me. Angela, I turned. This is going to become emotionally difficult. I smiled weakly. I think we're already there. She shook her head gently. No, I mean something else. She hesitated. If there's a child, she chose her words with extraordinary care. He didn't choose this. I closed my eyes briefly. I know. The sentence came almost automatically, because somewhere inside my heartbreak, a little boy kept appearing, not as evidence, not as paperwork, as a child, one who believed Marcus was simply his father, one who had no idea another family existed. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about him, 5 years old enough to recognize his father's face, young enough to believe adults always tell the truth. The realization broke something inside me. Whatever Marcus had hidden, he hadn't only lied to me, he had created 2 completely different versions of himself, one for each family. That evening, I walked quietly through my house, past our wedding photographs, past family portraits, past 31 years of memories displayed on every wall. For the first time, I wondered whether another home somewhere across the city held photographs too. Birthday parties, school pictures, Father's Day cards, Marcus smiling inside another life, a life I never knew existed. The thought felt unbearable. Just before going to bed, Laura sent me a short message, only one sentence. I found another recurring payment. This one is labeled Educational Services. Educational Services. My heart immediately understood what my mind still resisted. The child wasn't only real, he was old enough to be in school. And somehow, Marcus had been quietly paying for his education while convincing me every dollar belonged to his business.
I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I closed my eyes, turned from one side of the bed to the other, listened to Marcus breathing peacefully beside me. Every few minutes I looked at the ceiling, wondering how two people could occupy the same bed while living inside completely different realities. Around 3 in the morning, I quietly slipped out of bed. I didn't want to wake him, not because I was protecting him, because I needed silence. The house felt different at night. The familiar hallway seemed longer. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet. Every framed family photograph reflected faint moonlight. I paused beside one picture. Marcus holding our son on his first day of kindergarten. His smile looked genuine, his pride unmistakable. Then another thought entered my mind. Had he taken another little boy to kindergarten too? The question followed me all the way into the kitchen. I made tea, not because I wanted it, because I needed something to do with my hands. The kettle whistled softly, steam rose into the quiet room. I carried the mug into my home office and opened the folders Laura had returned the previous afternoon. She had organized everything with colored tabs: hospital documents, bank statements, credit card records, business reimbursements. One section immediately caught my attention: education payments. Inside were copies of transfers Laura had highlighted. Every September, every January, every August. The amounts varied slightly, unlike the monthly payments. I stared at the dates: school registration, semester fees, book purchases. The pattern felt unmistakable. Laura had written a small note beside one transaction: likely tuition-related based on timing. Likely. She still refused to state anything she couldn't prove. I admired that. I needed someone in my life who respected evidence more than assumptions, because assumptions had brought me enough pain already. At sunrise, Marcus came downstairs, still wearing his robe, smiling sleepily. "You've been up a while." I nodded. "Couldn't sleep." He poured himself coffee. "Too much on your mind?" If only he knew, or perhaps he already did. I studied him carefully. Did he wake every morning carrying 2 lives inside his head? Did he rehearse different conversations depending on which family he was visiting? Did he ever accidentally say the wrong child's name? Or had he become so skilled at compartmentalizing his life that nothing felt difficult anymore? The questions remained trapped inside me. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work. The gesture felt painfully familiar, one I'd accepted thousands of times without hesitation. Now I wondered how many mornings another woman had watched him leave with the same smile. After his car disappeared down the street, I immediately called Laura. "I found something," she answered. So did I. An hour later, I sat across from her again. She had several new documents waiting. I traced the educational payments. My heartbeat quickened. "What did you find?" Laura turned the first page toward me. The payments weren't made directly to a school. They were made to an educational trust, established almost 5 years earlier. The beneficiary's name had been partially redacted in publicly available records, but one detail remained visible: the trustee, Marcus Carter. I felt my stomach tighten. So he created a trust? Laura nodded slowly. It appears so. Another page followed: monthly insurance premiums, pediatric medical coverage, dental benefits, vision care. Each payment appeared under different names, different companies, different billing descriptions. Individually, they looked ordinary. Together, they formed the financial outline of raising a child. Laura quietly folded her hands. I think we've identified most of the recurring expenses. I looked down at the pages: monthly support, medical insurance, education, birthday purchases, holiday shopping. Every line represented another moment I'd never witnessed, another memory built somewhere else, without me. Laura reached into another folder. This came from public property records. She slid the document toward me. A residential lease. The address meant nothing to me. The tenant's name, Danielle Brooks. The emergency contact listed on the lease application, Marcus Carter. Again, his signature appeared near the bottom. Different document, same handwriting, same man, same hidden life. I closed my eyes briefly. How many documents existed carrying Marcus's signature I'd never seen? How many promises had he written elsewhere while promising honesty at home? Laura remained quiet, giving me time. Eventually, I asked the question neither of us wanted to answer. What do we know about Danielle? Laura spoke gently. Very little. Public records show she works as a pediatric nurse. No criminal history, no lawsuits, no unusual financial activity. She looked directly at me. Nothing suggests she knew about you. The sentence landed unexpectedly. I had imagined many things over the past few days: anger, manipulation, conspiracy. Instead, the evidence suggested something much sadder. Another woman living inside a different version of Marcus's story, believing it completely. Laura quietly continued. I found something else. She handed me copies of social media photographs. Not many. Danielle rarely posted publicly. Most images showed birthday parties, a little boy playing soccer, first day of preschool, Halloween costumes. In nearly every photograph, the child's face was carefully visible. Marcus never appeared, not once. I frowned. Why isn't he in any of these? Laura answered thoughtfully. If he was maintaining 2 families, she paused, he probably avoided public photographs. The realization chilled me, not because Marcus was absent, because his absence likely had been intentional, carefully managed, carefully planned, carefully hidden. Just before I left, Laura quietly said something that stayed with me the entire drive home. Angela, I looked back. I don't think this investigation is uncovering an affair. She paused. I think it's uncovering a second family. Those 3 words echoed inside my mind long after I returned home. A second family. Not occasional mistakes, not brief deception. A complete life running alongside mine for nearly 6 years. And somewhere in that other life, a little boy probably spent every evening waiting for his father to come home, never realizing another family was waiting too. Laura's words stayed with me for days. A second family. Not an affair, not a series of bad decisions. A family. There's something profoundly different about those 2 ideas. An affair can be impulsive, temporary. A family requires birthdays, doctor appointments, school registrations, Christmas presents, routine, consistency, presence. You don't accidentally become a father for 6 years. You choose it again and again and again. That realization hurt in ways I hadn't expected. Not because Marcus loved another child. Children deserve love. Every child. What hurt was realizing he had somehow found enough time, enough money, enough emotional energy to build another life while allowing me to believe we shared everything. The following Monday, Laura called. "I think it's time for Michael to see everything." An hour later, the three of us sat together in her conference room. The evidence had grown considerably. Hospital admission forms, financial records, insurance payments, educational trust documents, public property records. Every folder neatly labeled, every page organized chronologically. Michael reviewed everything without interruption. He rarely reacted visibly while reading. Years of legal practice had taught him patience. When he finally closed the last binder, he leaned back quietly. "What do you think?" I asked. He folded his hands. "I think you have enough information to understand the financial picture." I nodded. "But?" He smiled gently. "There's always a but." Another pause. "The personal picture is still incomplete." Laura agreed. "We know where much of the money went. We don't yet know how the relationships were represented." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael answered. "We know what Marcus told you." He paused. "We don't know what Marcus told Danielle." The question landed heavily. I had been so focused on my own marriage that I'd barely considered hers, or rather, the relationship she believed she was building. If she thought Marcus was separated, then she had been living inside a lie too. That possibility changed something inside me. Until then, Danielle had existed only as a name on paperwork. Now she became another human being, another woman, perhaps another victim. Michael continued. "Before any confrontation, I'd like to understand that part of the story." Laura nodded. "I agree. Neither of them rushed toward dramatic conclusions. That steadiness kept me grounded, because emotionally, everything inside me wanted immediate answers. That afternoon, Laura completed another financial reconstruction. She called me back into her office. "I found something important." She turned her computer screen toward me. A timeline stretched nearly 6 years. Each recurring payment appeared in chronological order: monthly transfers, insurance premiums, educational expenses, birthday purchases, holiday shopping. Then she highlighted another pattern: travel expenses. Marcus hadn't only traveled for construction conferences. Several trips coincided almost perfectly with the little boy's birthday, Christmas, spring break, summer vacation. My hand slowly covered my mouth. He planned vacations around both families. Laura answered quietly. "It appears that way." The realization overwhelmed me. I remembered years of compromise. "We'll celebrate Christmas a day early. I have to leave for a project. The client changed the schedule." Every explanation suddenly carried another meaning. Some holidays he hadn't chosen work. He had chosen another home. I looked at Laura. How could someone keep all this straight? She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, "When deception becomes routine, people build systems." Systems? Calendars, excuses, separate credit cards, different stories? The thought exhausted me. How much effort had Marcus invested in maintaining lies? Imagine if he'd invested that same effort into honesty. Later that evening, Michael called again. "I found something in the court records." My heartbeat quickened. "What?" Nothing criminal, he reassured me immediately, but important. A family court filing several years earlier, sealed because it involved a minor child. Marcus's name appeared, not as a defendant, as a voluntary participant. He had acknowledged legal responsibility for the child, quietly, privately, without contest, without telling me. I sat silently for several moments. So, Michael finished the sentence gently. The child almost certainly knows Marcus as his father. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I looked toward the framed family photographs on my bookshelf. Our son's graduation, family vacations, birthday celebrations, memories carefully preserved. Somewhere else, another little boy probably had photographs too. Father's Day drawings, school art projects, perhaps even homemade cards addressed to Dad. The child hadn't stolen anything from me, neither had Danielle. Marcus had divided himself and somehow convinced both households they possessed his whole heart. That realization brought an emotion I never expected. Not anger, sadness, profound sadness for everyone, including the child who would someday learn how his family truly began. The following morning, Laura sent me one final message before work. I located Danielle's employment history. We met after lunch. Laura handed me several pages. Danielle had worked continuously as a pediatric nurse for years. No unexplained wealth, no extravagant purchases, no unusual financial activity. In fact, most of her income supported ordinary family expenses, mortgage payments, groceries, school supplies, utilities. Laura looked directly at me. I don't believe she was financially exploiting Marcus. I nodded slowly. Neither do I. She continued. I think she believed they were building a future together. Those words settled heavily over the room, because if Laura was right, Marcus hadn't simply betrayed one woman, he had betrayed two, using different promises, different stories, the same lies. As I gathered my papers to leave, my phone buzzed unexpectedly. A text message from an unfamiliar number. Only one sentence. I think we need to talk about Marcus. No signature, no explanation, just those 8 words. I stared at the screen. A strange feeling settled over me. Deep inside, I already knew who had sent it. I stared at the text message for nearly 5 minutes. I think we need to talk about Marcus. No name, no explanation, only those 8 words. My first instinct was to ignore it. After everything I'd learned during the past week, another surprise felt impossible to survive. Yet something about the message felt different. There was no anger, no accusation, no threat, only quiet certainty, almost as though the sender had been waiting for the right moment. Laura looked at my phone. You know who it is? I slowly shook my head. I think I do, but I'm not completely sure. She gently reached across the table. If you answer, don't answer alone. I appreciated that immediately. There had already been enough secrets. There would be no private confrontations, no emotional phone calls, no rushed decisions. Everything from this point forward would happen in the open. I typed carefully. Who is this? Less than 30 seconds later, another message appeared. My name is Danielle Brooks. My heart stopped. Not literally, but enough that the room seemed to disappear for a moment. Laura quietly read the screen. Neither of us spoke. Another message arrived. I just found out Marcus is married. Every emotion inside me suddenly collided. Shock, sadness, relief, compassion, For nearly a week, Danielle had existed only as paperwork, a hospital bill, a lease agreement, financial records. Now, she became a woman sitting somewhere, looking at her own phone, trying to understand how her life had fallen apart. Laura asked softly, "Would you like me to stay?" I looked at her. "Please." She nodded. I typed again. "How did you get my number?" The response came almost immediately. The hospital mailed one of my old billing statements to the wrong address years ago. Another pause, then another message. "I recently requested copies of my medical records for insurance purposes. Your address was listed in the correspondence history." The room became completely silent. The same administrative mistake that had changed my life had eventually changed hers, too. Danielle continued, "I thought it was a clerical error. Then I searched your name. I found your anniversary announcement online." I closed my eyes. Our local newspaper had published a short article celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary the previous year, complete with photographs. Marcus standing beside me, smiling, wearing the same suit he'd probably worn somewhere else the following week. Danielle sent another message. Marcus told me he'd been separated for years. There it was, the sentence Michael predicted we might eventually hear. Separated. Not married, not happily married. Separated. Different story, same deception. Laura quietly whispered, "I think she believed him." So do I. For several moments, none of us typed anything. Finally, I wrote the only truthful response I could manage. "I didn't know about you either." 3 dots appeared almost immediately, disappeared, returned. Finally, her answer arrived. "Can we meet?" I looked toward Laura. She already understood the question. "I'll come with you." I smiled weakly. "I don't think I can do this alone." "You won't." The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon, a quiet coffee shop halfway across the city, neutral ground, public, safe. The next 24 hours passed painfully slowly. I imagined every possible version of Danielle, angry, defensive, confrontational, heartbroken, perhaps all of those at once. Nothing prepared me for the woman who actually walked through the coffee shop door. She looked tired, not dramatic, not glamorous, simply exhausted. About my age, dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, hospital identification badge still clipped to her purse. She looked exactly like someone who had finished a long nursing shift before gathering enough courage to meet a complete stranger. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. Neither woman spoke. Neither woman knew how. Finally, Danielle quietly said, "I'm sorry." The words caught me completely off guard. I shook my head immediately. "You don't owe me an apology." Tears filled her eyes. "I think I do." She sat carefully across from me. Laura remained beside us, but allowed the conversation to unfold naturally. Danielle reached into her handbag, removed several photographs. She pushed them gently across the table. "This is Ethan." A little boy smiled back at me, missing one front tooth, holding a soccer trophy. Another photograph showed him dressed for his first day of kindergarten, another at the zoo, another carving pumpkins for Halloween. Every picture showed happiness, normal childhood. One detail immediately stood out. Marcus wasn't in any of them. Danielle noticed me looking. He never wanted photographs online. Her voice trembled slightly. He always said his divorce was complicated. The word echoed painfully. Divorce. Not married. Divorce. Different lie, same purpose. Protecting the truth from both families. Danielle wiped away quiet tears. I believed every word. So did I. The sentence left my mouth before I realized I was speaking. For the first time since the hospital bill arrived, I wasn't sitting across from the other woman. I was sitting across from another person whose trust had been carefully manufactured. Different promises, different home, the same deception. Danielle opened another envelope. I brought something. Inside were birthday cards, insurance forms, school enrollment paperwork. Every document carried Marcus's signature. Every document described him as father. Not once did he mention another family. Not once did she question why. Because why would she? Trust rarely asks for proof. It simply believes. Danielle looked directly into my eyes, then quietly asked the question neither of us could answer. How many lies do you think he had to tell to keep both of us believing we were the only family he had? Neither of us spoke, because somewhere between my hospital bill and her family photographs, we had both already realized the answer. Far too many.
Danielle and I sat in silence for several minutes after her question. Neither of us reached for our coffee. Neither of us seemed to notice the conversations happening around us. The coffee shop remained busy. People laughed, students worked on laptops, a young couple shared dessert near the window. Ordinary life continued. Meanwhile, two strangers quietly compared pieces of the same broken story. Danielle finally spoke. I brought something else. She opened a second envelope. This one contained greeting cards, handmade drawings, construction paper Father's Day cards covered with crayons and glitter. My heart immediately tightened. One card read, "To the best dad ever." Another simply said, "I love you, Daddy." Small fingerprints in blue paint decorated the edges. The little boy's name was signed carefully in oversized letters, Ethan. I stared at the cards, not because they belonged to Marcus, because they belonged to a child who had absolutely no idea his father's life existed in two completely different worlds. Danielle noticed my expression. He waits for Marcus every Friday. She smiled sadly. Marcus always said Fridays belonged to him. Fridays. My mind immediately searched through years of memories. Every Friday evening, Marcus claimed he met clients, construction contracts, business dinners, networking events. Sometimes he didn't come home until nearly midnight. Sometimes he stayed at hotels because meetings ran late. At least, that's what he told me. Danielle quietly continued. I thought he was making time for us. I looked down at the Father's Day cards. I thought he was working. The painful symmetry settled over both of us. One man, two completely different explanations, both believable, both false. Laura remained silent beside us, allowing the conversation to belong to the two women whose lives had collided because of one envelope. Danielle reached into her purse again. This time she removed several photographs. Marcus appeared in these. Not many, only printed photographs, never digital, never posted online. One showed him teaching Ethan how to ride a bicycle. Another captured them fishing beside a small lake. Another showed Marcus kneeling beside a birthday cake while Ethan blew out 5 candles. I recognized the shirt Marcus wore, blue plaid, long sleeves. I had bought it for him, our anniversary gift. I remembered wrapping it, remembered watching him open it. He kissed my forehead and thanked me. Several months later, he wore it while celebrating another little boy's birthday. The realization made my chest ache. I looked away briefly, trying to steady myself. Danielle quietly asked, "Are you all right?" I nodded automatically, then corrected myself. No, she understood. So am I. We both smiled sadly, not because anything was funny, because honesty sometimes creates understanding faster than words. After a while, Danielle began telling me about Ethan. He loves dinosaurs. She smiled despite her tears. And soccer. He wants to become an architect. I listened carefully. Every sentence made Ethan more real. He wasn't simply the child. He was a little boy with favorite foods, favorite cartoons, favorite bedtime stories. He had dreams, questions, fears. He deserved stability. None of this belonged to him. Eventually, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Does he know about me? Danielle immediately shook her head. No. I only found out last week. She looked down at her hands. I haven't known how to explain any of this. Neither had I. How do you explain to a child that adults sometimes build entire lives upon lies? You don't. Not at 5 years old. Perhaps not at any age. Laura finally spoke. What happened after you confronted Marcus? Danielle laughed softly, a laugh completely empty of humor. He denied everything. Another pause. At first, I wasn't surprised. She continued. Then I showed him your anniversary announcement. Silence. He couldn't deny it anymore. I remembered the newspaper photograph, Marcus standing proudly beside me beneath the headlines celebrating 30 decades of marriage. One photograph, one public moment, enough to unravel years of deception. Danielle quietly continued. He cried. I looked at her. He admitted he'd never expected us to meet. The sentence lingered between us. Never expected us to meet. How carefully had he arranged our lives? Different grocery stores, different restaurants, different holidays, different weekends. An entire system built around separation. One mistake, one hospital envelope, everything collapsed. Danielle reached across the table, not dramatically, simply placing her hand gently over mine. I don't hate you. The words surprised me. I don't hate you either. She nodded. I don't think either of us was ever the enemy. No, we weren't. The enemy had never been another woman. It had been deception, years of it. As we prepared to leave, Danielle handed me one final document. I think you should have this. It was a copy of Ethan's birth certificate. Marcus Carter, father, officially recorded, legally acknowledged. No question remained, only consequences. I carefully folded the document, returned it to its envelope, then looked back at Danielle. What happens now? She thought for a long moment. Finally, she answered, I don't know. Another pause. But I know one thing. What? She looked directly into my eyes. I don't want Ethan growing up believing lies are what fathers do. The sentence stayed with me all the way home, not because it condemned Marcus, because it defended Ethan. The child deserves something neither of us had received, the truth, even if it arrived painfully late. That evening, I unlocked my front door and stepped inside my quiet house. Family photographs still lined the hallway, wedding pictures, graduation portraits, vacation memories. Only now, I realized those walls held only half of Marcus's story. The other half had been living across the city, hidden behind another front door, another dining table, another little boy waiting every Friday for his father to arrive. And now, neither family would ever be able to unknow what had finally come to light. After meeting Danielle, I stopped asking whether the hospital bill was real. That question had already been answered. Instead, I began asking something much harder. Who had Marcus become? Not the man I married, not the father I believed I knew. The man capable of living two completely separate lives for nearly 6 years. Those are very different people.
I spent the weekend walking through my house, not because I had nowhere else to go, because every room seemed to contain another memory. The kitchen where we celebrated birthdays, the living room where Marcus wrapped Christmas presents every December, the backyard where we hosted neighborhood barbecues. Every space carried happiness, real happiness. That was the confusing part. None of those memories felt fake. Marcus had loved our family. I believed that. The tragedy wasn't that his love had been imaginary. The tragedy was that he had divided it. He'd convinced himself he could give complete devotion to two families. Eventually, the math stopped working. Monday morning, Laura called. "I've completed the financial reconstruction." I drove to her office immediately. She greeted me with a thick binder, nearly 3 inches wide, every page carefully organized. I traced almost every recurring payment. She opened the first section: monthly child support, health insurance premiums, educational trust contributions, sports registration fees, summer camp deposits, holiday purchases, birthday expenses. Everything documented, everything supported by records, nothing based on guesses. Laura pointed toward one timeline. The pattern remained remarkably consistent. Her finger moved slowly across 6 years. Marcus rarely missed a payment. Another page. He increased contributions as Ethan grew older. Another. The educational expenses became larger once school began. I stared at the pages. There it was, a financial portrait of fatherhood, not occasional generosity, ongoing responsibility. Marcus hadn't forgotten the child. He had actively participated in raising him, quietly, secretly. Laura looked at me carefully. "I know this is painful." I nodded. "But I think something else is important." "What?" "Nothing suggests Ethan was neglected." I understood what she meant immediately. The little boy had been cared for, fed, educated, protected. The failure belonged to Marcus, not to the child, not to Danielle. That distinction mattered enormously. Later that afternoon, Michael joined us. He reviewed Laura's findings carefully, then quietly closed the binder. "The evidence is comprehensive." I looked at him. "What happens next?" He answered calmly. "Now Marcus has an opportunity." An opportunity? To tell the truth. The simplicity of his answer surprised me. For nearly 2 weeks, my life had revolved around discovering facts. Eventually, facts require conversations. No one could postpone that forever. Michael continued, "I don't recommend surprising him." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "If you're going to confront him, he deserves to know this conversation matters. Not to protect him, to protect the truth." I agreed. That evening, I called Marcus while he was still at work. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. "Can we talk tonight?" He laughed lightly. "Of course. Everything okay?" I looked out the kitchen window before answering. "No." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "I'll come straight home." He didn't ask more questions. Perhaps something in my voice told him enough. The next 3 hours felt longer than the previous week. I arranged the documents neatly on the dining room table, not dramatically, simply in order. The hospital bill, the admission forms, the bank statements, the educational trust, the birth certificate Danielle gave me. One document leading naturally to the next. No accusations, only evidence. At exactly 6:15, I heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway. My heart began pounding, not because I feared him, because I knew what was ending. The front door opened. He stepped inside, immediately stopped. The dining room table was visible from the hallway. He looked at the paperwork, then looked at me. Something changed in his face instantly. First confusion, then recognition, then fear. real fear. He quietly placed his briefcase beside the door. No greeting, no small talk. He walked slowly toward the table. His eyes landed on the hospital bill. The color disappeared from his face. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "Where did you get this?" I answered honestly, "It came in the mail." He closed his eyes, as though those 5 words explained everything. When he opened them again, they looked different. Not angry, not defensive, only exhausted. I gently pushed another document toward him, the birth certificate. He stared at it silently, then at Danielle's name, then at Ethan's. His shoulders seemed to collapse. He lowered himself into a dining room chair, not because I asked him to, because his legs no longer seemed strong enough to hold him. I remained standing. 31 years of marriage stood between us, and a single hospital envelope. Finally, I asked the question that lived inside me since Wednesday morning. Who is Ethan? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, tears slowly filled his eyes. The silence stretched painfully. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he quietly said, "My son." 2 words, nothing more. No excuses, no explanations, only the truth. The truth I'd spent 9 days uncovering, the truth he had spent 6 years hiding, and somehow, hearing him finally say it out loud hurt even more than discovering it myself. The words lingered in the room long after Marcus stopped speaking. My son. 2 simple words, no elaborate explanation, no attempt to deny what the documents already proved. For the first time in days, there was no uncertainty left, only truth, painful, unavoidable, complete. Marcus remained seated, staring at the hospital bill as though he had never seen it before. I stayed standing, not because I wanted to appear stronger, because if I sat down, I wasn't sure I would be able to stand again. The silence between us lasted several minutes. Finally, I asked quietly, "When?" Marcus rubbed both hands across his face. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Almost 6 years ago. The number struck me even though I already knew it. Hearing him say it made it real in a different way. 6 years, more than 2,000 days, thousands of mornings, thousands of decisions, thousands of opportunities to tell me the truth. Instead, he had chosen another lie every single day. I looked at the photographs on the dining room wall. Family vacations, graduations, holiday dinners. Every year of those 6 years smiled back at me. Yet somewhere beyond those photographs, another family had been creating memories too. "When did you meet Danielle?" I asked. Marcus swallowed hard. "About 7 years ago. She worked on a community construction project." I nodded slowly. "A year before Ethan was born." "Yes. And when did you tell her you were separated?" His eyes filled with shame. "Almost immediately." The answer hurt more than I expected, not because he lied, because the lie had been immediate, not desperate, not accidental, planned. "I told her," he paused, "that my marriage had ended years earlier." The room became painfully quiet. "So she believed she was building a future." He nodded. "Yes. And all those years?" I struggled to finish the sentence. "She never knew about me?" "No." His answer came instantly. "She didn't." I closed my eyes briefly. Laura had been right. Michael had been right. Danielle had been another victim, not my rival, not my replacement, simply another woman who believed the man she loved. I opened the folder Danielle had given me. Inside were Ethan's photographs. I placed them gently on the table. Marcus looked at them. His face softened immediately. I noticed it. A father's expression. Love. Concern. Pride. Real emotions. Nothing forced. Nothing artificial. That realization brought an emotion I hadn't expected. grief, because everything would have been so much easier if Marcus had never cared. But he did. He loved Ethan. He loved our son. Somehow, he believed loving both children justified deceiving both families. He quietly picked up the photograph of Ethan holding his soccer trophy. He scored his first goal that day. His voice trembled. He looked for me in the crowd afterwards. Another photograph. That's his first bicycle. Another. He was scared to ride without training wheels. I listened silently. Every memory made Ethan more real, more innocent. Marcus looked up. I never wanted either child to feel abandoned. I answered softly. So you abandoned the truth instead. His shoulders dropped. Yes. The honesty surprised me. No argument, no excuses, just acceptance. Several minutes passed before I asked the question that haunted me since the hospital envelope arrived. Marcus, he looked up, did you ever intend to tell me? Marcus stared at the table for so long I wondered if he hadn't heard me. Finally, he answered, every year. I frowned. What? Every birthday, every Christmas, every anniversary. I told myself, after this holiday, after this project, after Ethan gets older, after I figure everything out. His voice broke completely. I kept moving the truth into the future. There it was, the sentence that explained 6 years, not justified them, explained them. Tomorrow, always tomorrow, until one ordinary hospital envelope arrived before tomorrow could. I slowly gathered the documents into one stack, then quietly asked the final question. Not about Danielle, not about the money, not even about the affair, about something much deeper. Marcus, he looked up, when did you stop believing that I deserved the truth? Tears rolled silently down his face. He didn't answer immediately, because there was no answer capable of repairing that kind of wound. Finally, after what felt like forever, he whispered, I don't think I ever stopped believing you deserved it. He paused. I just became more afraid of losing everything than I was committed to being honest. The room fell silent again, and in that moment, I realized his greatest betrayal wasn't fathering another child, it was choosing fear over truth every single day for nearly 6 years. The days after my conversation with Marcus felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The shouting I had imagined never happened. The dramatic scenes people expect after discovering betrayal never came. There were no broken dishes, no slammed doors, no neighbors gathering outside to see what the noise was about. Only silence. Sometimes silence carries more weight than anger ever could. Marcus moved into the guest room, not because I demanded it, because he quietly packed a small suitcase after our conversation and said, I think you deserve space. I simply nodded. Neither of us had the energy for another discussion. The truth had already exhausted us both. For several days, we lived like respectful strangers, passing each other in the hallway, sharing brief conversations about groceries, discussing household bills. Ordinary responsibilities continued. Life has an odd way of refusing to pause, even when your heart wishes it would. One afternoon, Michael came to the house, not as my attorney, as someone making sure I understood every option available to me. We sat in the dining room where the hospital bill still rested inside a neatly organized folder. He reviewed financial records, property documents, retirement accounts, insurance policies, everything. Then he looked directly at me. What do you want? The question surprised me. Everyone else had asked what Marcus wanted, what Danielle wanted, what would happen to Ethan. Very few people had asked me. I thought carefully before answering. I want honesty. Michael smiled gently. That's understandable. I shook my head. No, I mean complete honesty. No more discovery 6 months from now. No more hidden accounts. No more surprises. If we're going to rebuild anything, I need to know what I'm rebuilding. He nodded. I think that's a very reasonable boundary. Reasonable. The word comforted me. For days, I'd worried my expectations had become impossible. Perhaps they weren't. That evening, Marcus agreed to meet with Michael present, not because we expected legal conflict, because difficult conversations sometimes need calm witnesses. We sat around the dining room table, the same place where I'd first laid out the evidence. This time, there were no hidden documents, only questions. Marcus answered every one, patiently, completely. He disclosed bank accounts, credit cards, insurance policies, retirement savings, business interests. Nothing else unexpected appeared. Oddly enough, that helped. Not because the truth became easier, because it finally felt complete. When the meeting ended, Michael quietly gathered his notes. Before leaving, he looked at both of us. Whatever happens next, he paused. Make sure it happens with honesty. Simple advice, yet it would have prevented years of pain if followed much earlier. A week later, Danielle called, not about Marcus, about Ethan. He keeps asking why his father looks so sad. Her voice sounded exhausted. I closed my eyes. Children notice everything, even when adults think they're hiding it. What did you tell him? The truth. I waited. Well, she corrected herself, the part he can understand. I told him grown-ups sometimes make mistakes. I told him none of those mistakes were his fault. Tears filled my eyes. She had chosen the one truth every child deserved to hear first. None of this is your fault. We spoke for nearly an hour, not about betrayal, about parenting, about protecting children from adult failures. By the end of the conversation, something remarkable had happened. The tension between us had disappeared completely. Not because the circumstances changed, because blame finally rested where it belonged. Marcus had created the deception. Neither of us had created each other. Several days later, Marcus asked if we could walk together, not to discuss reconciliation, simply to talk. We walked slowly through the neighborhood park where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings over the years. Autumn leaves covered the walking paths, families played with children near the pond. Life continued. Eventually, Marcus stopped beside a bench. I've been thinking about Ethan. I looked at him, and our son. Another pause. I spent years convincing myself I was giving them both everything. He shook his head slowly. I wasn't. What were you giving them? I asked quietly. He answered without hesitation. A father who was never completely present. The honesty surprised me. He continued. When I was with one family, I worried about the other. I never fully arrived anywhere. The words settled heavily inside me. He was right. Deception doesn't only divide truth, it divides attention, peace, presence. No one receives the whole person, not even the one telling the lies. We sat on the bench watching children chase pigeons across the grass. Finally, Marcus whispered, I thought hiding the truth protected everyone. I answered softly, it protected the secret, not the people. He nodded. For several minutes, we simply watched the sunset. No arguments remained, no dramatic speeches, only consequences, real ones. As we walked back toward our cars, Marcus stopped one final time. The hospital bill, he smiled sadly. I almost threw it away before forwarding my mail years ago. I looked at him. He continued quietly. I never imagined one ordinary envelope would become the thing that finally told the truth. Neither had I. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive through investigators or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it arrives because a single piece of paper ends up in the wrong mailbox and refuses to stay silent.
People often ask me what happened after the hospital bill. Did I forgive Marcus? Did we stay married? Did Danielle and I remain in contact? Did Ethan ever learn the whole truth? Those are understandable questions, but they aren't the questions that changed my life. The question that changed everything was much quieter. What kind of person did I want to become after discovering the truth? Betrayal has a way of offering you two paths. One leads toward bitterness. The other leads toward wisdom. Both require effort. Only one allows you to sleep peacefully. I chose wisdom, not because I was stronger than anyone else, because I had already spent enough years unknowingly carrying someone else's secrets. I wasn't willing to spend the rest of my life carrying someone else's resentment, too. Marcus and I eventually accepted that our marriage could not return to what it had once been. Trust isn't rebuilt simply because the truth is finally spoken. Trust grows through honesty practiced over time. Sometimes that rebuilding happens together, sometimes it happens separately. Our journey took us in different directions. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't filled with courtroom battles or public arguments. It was quiet, respectful, painful, and honest. For the first time in years, honesty became the foundation instead of the exception. Danielle and I spoke several more times over the following months, never as rivals, never as enemies, only as two women whose lives had been permanently connected by one man's decisions. One afternoon, she sent me a photograph. Ethan stood proudly holding a certificate from school, his smile stretched from ear to ear. On the back of the photograph, she had written one sentence: "He deserves a future built on truth." I kept that photograph, not because it belonged to my family, because it reminded me that children should never become responsible for adult deception. Ethan remained exactly what he had always been, an innocent little boy. He did not choose the circumstances of his birth. He did not create broken promises. He simply deserved honesty, stability, and love. So did our son. The greatest tragedy wasn't that Marcus loved two children. Love is never the problem. The tragedy was believing love could grow stronger while honesty grew weaker. It can't. Eventually, one began starving the other. Laura remained one of my closest friends. She often joked that she had spent years following money, only to discover that the most valuable things in life never appear on financial statements. Trust, integrity, peace, those things never fit neatly into spreadsheets, yet losing them costs more than any unpaid bill ever could. Michael once told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Most legal files begin because someone ignored a small truth." At the time, I thought he was talking about paperwork. Now I understand he was talking about life. The hospital bill looked insignificant, just another envelope among advertisements and utility statements. I almost threw it away. If I had, how much longer would the deception have continued? Another year? 5? 10? I don't know. Neither does Marcus. Because one ordinary Wednesday morning, I chose curiosity instead of convenience. That single decision changed every life connected to ours. Today, my home is quieter than it used to be, but quiet no longer feels empty. It feels honest. Every financial statement I receive, I open myself. Every account is reviewed together with trusted professionals when needed. Every important document is read carefully, not because I expect betrayal, because transparency creates peace. People sometimes mistake vigilance for suspicion. They aren't the same thing. Suspicion assumes guilt. Vigilance simply respects responsibility. There is an enormous difference. As for Marcus, he continues being Ethan's father. He continues being our son's father. Only now he does so without hidden calendars, invented business trips, or carefully rehearsed excuses. The truth, painful as it was, finally gave him something deception never could: one complete life, not two incomplete ones. I genuinely hope he becomes the father both boys deserve, because children should never have to compete with secrets.
The hospital bill still sits inside a folder in my home office, not as a reminder of betrayal, as a reminder of awakening. Whenever I see that envelope, I don't think about the day my marriage changed. I think about the day uncertainty ended. There is unexpected peace in finally knowing the truth, even when the truth hurts, especially when it hurts. If my story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this. Never ignore the small things simply because they seem ordinary. Read the documents, ask respectful questions, pay attention when something doesn't make sense. Healthy relationships are never threatened by honest conversations. Real trust welcomes transparency. It never fears it. That hospital bill wasn't really about unpaid medical expenses. It was an invoice for 6 years of hidden choices. Eventually, every hidden choice demands to be accounted for, not always in a courtroom, not always in public, but always in life. And I've learned something I carry with me every single day. The first honest document I received in years wasn't the one that broke my heart. It was the one that finally set it free. If my story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe for more powerful true life stories, and leave a comment below sharing where you're watching from and the lesson that stayed with you the most.